Many people suffer with sleep problems, and there is a big link between sleep and stress. Today, I'm talking to Doctor of Psychology Marcelle Crinean about this link and about what you can do to help yourself sleep well. But before I do that, I'm going to ask Marcelle what it is that stresses her out on a day-to-day basis.
So to be honest, there's a number of things that stress me out on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to say the most common thing, or the thing that irritates me the most and really causes me stress, is when my partner, who's relatively untidy, feels the need to pile dirty plates on top of a work surface that's right next to the dishwasher. Or it's that. And sometimes you think the distance of where you've traveled to put that is further than the distance to just put it in the dishwasher. And it infuriates me. It absolutely infuriates me. I just don't understand it.
I don't. We've had some debates. Well, I'm calling them debates, but that's been
yeah. And every time it happens, and the problem with that is I'm anticipating it happening every night. So even though it hasn't happened yet, in my mind, even in the morning at breakfast time, I'm going, I know what's going to happen tonight. I know what's going to happen tonight. The dishes are just going to be left on the side, and it's that. So I'm beyond, as you can tell, beyond irritable, much closer to stress. And I've tried over the years to not let it bother me, but it does, right? It just does. And it's not just that, right? It's the toilet rolls and it's everything. It becomes a wider issue. It's not just the dishwasher. It's the whole, why can't you put an empty toilet roll in the bin? Like, the bin is directly underneath the toilet roll holder, right? I've put it there on purpose. It's directly underneath. So my trick, I guess, so that I don't, have my blood pressure sky high over something so small, because actually what I do try to remind myself is it's not a big thing. It's not a life-threatening thing. So I take a deep breath, and then I remind myself of all of his good qualities.
Yeah.
And remind myself that, look, this is what he does well. This is what he does well. Am I really going to make such a mountain out of a molehill over that?
Yeah.
There's more important things in the world.
Yeah.
So
it does distort our view of somebody, doesn't it? So that's a lovely way of kind of reconnecting with what is good, rather than making what is irritating the big thing. Yeah.
Which it so can, because it happens every day. But yes, it's that. But that's probably my most stressful thing. My most stressful thing. And I think a lot of people do. I see it on social media. It's like, does anybody else have a husband that? And I want to go, yes I do. But yeah, it's not a big thing, right? It's really not, in the scheme of everything that's wrong. It's such a small thing. I remind myself of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because it's a small thing that we make a big thing.
Yeah.
So really, it's the big thing in our heads. It's
Exactly.
completely small to them and inconsequential, but to us. So it's what we do with it in our own minds, isn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly. And we both know, right? We both know that what causes stress is not the thing, but it's how we think about the thing.
Exactly.
So I remind myself of that and say, look, if I'm getting cross, it's only because of how I'm thinking about it. He doesn't see a problem with it, so he doesn't get stressed by it. So it must be the way I'm thinking about it. So but I've tried over the years to try and make it not an important thing to me. But it is an important thing to me. So I reframe it by, okay, what are his good qualities? I'm choosing to stay here, right? I'm choosing to be with him. So there must be a lot more good things than there are little irritants.
A school of thought which I really like, which is called nonviolent communication. I don't really like the phrase, to be honest with you, because it's got the word violence in it, which means it implies you're either being violent or non-violent, but it's actually quite a good technique. where it's how you address a problem. So I do identify with yours, and it teaches that what you do in that situation is say, you know, I know it's not important to you, but it is so important to me that the house is tidy. And since it's so near the dishwasher, it would really mean a lot to me if you would just aim for the dishwasher.
Yeah. We do that. That's exactly how I approach it. And I just say, you know, I use the whole baby step strategy. So, which is, I get that that's, you know, how you behave is, you know, you've done over years of training, and how I want things doesn't mean my way's the right way. But what can we do? What's one step that you could take towards, you know, change? And what's one step that I could take towards compromise? Exactly. And that's kind of how we work through our life. So so if he doesn't quite do things the way I want to, he just goes, baby steps. And I'm like, yes, but baby steps means you actually have to take a step. Baby steps doesn't mean you could just say baby steps at me. But yes, it's that. So that's what we try to do, because I'm very aware that just because I like things done a certain way, it doesn't mean it's the right way.
Yeah.
So although I do think it is the right way, but it doesn't mean that, you know, but we do things differently, and we do a lot of things differently. You know, that's what makes the world go round.
Exactly. I mean, so, I think we attract people that press our buttons so that we can grow from the experience. Anyway, I allow us to digress, because I think this is a real thing for people, isn't it? It's just such a big issue. So I hope you didn't mind my kind of taking time with that.
Not at all.
Let's talk about sleep. What is the link between sleep and stress, would you say, Marcelle?
So the way I work is I work very much from a neuroscience perspective. So I work everything in terms of what are the chemicals that our brain is producing when we're awake, and what are the chemicals that our brain is producing when we're stressed. And it's the same one, right? So cortisol, which is our main stress hormone, is also our awake chemical. It's the thing that wakes us up in the morning. So for me, when we are overloaded with stress, we're overloaded with awake. Right? It's the same thing. So if we think about how stress works, and you will know this better than anyone, you know, when stress chemicals are released into our body, it's because our brain has interpreted a threat and we've gone into fight flight. So if we think about a threat that's chasing us back in primitive times, we have to be awake. We have to be alert, right? We can't suddenly go, oh, I've just had a really carb heavy meal. I'm just going to have a snooze now, even though this big saber-toothed tiger's on my back, right? We can't do that. We have to be alert. The problem is then we have to be focused on it. So when we are stressed, we are focused on the threat, which of course creates more anxiety. Because we're going, what if it gets me? What if it chases me? What if this happens? What if that happens? And of course, all that does is just create more of the stress chemical, because I'm now alert and focused on the threat. So more awake means I can't sleep. But unfortunately, sleep, and especially the REM state of sleep, the rapid eye movement dream state of sleep, is where we empty our stress buckets. So if we're not sleeping, we don't empty our stress bucket. But if we're stressing, we're filling the bucket and not sleeping. So it's a real chicken and egg, and it's quite difficult to pull apart. So you're absolutely right. As you said in the beginning, there's a lot of people who can't sleep because they're stressed and anxious and worried. I mean, there are other reasons why people don't sleep, which aren't stress related. Yeah. But most of the people who I see and who you see, I imagine, are, you know, we're in our heads, we're worried about things, and our brain can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger, a real threat, and an imagined threat, or a threat that we've experienced in the past, or something that we've imagined, something that somebody's told us about, right? It can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined threat. So we get that same fight flight response. And if our brain thinks there's a threat chasing us, it has to be awake.
Yeah.
So for me, that's how I generally describe it. which is, you know, we're worried, we're anxious, we're thinking all the time, we've got these busy minds, and that keeps us awake or pings us wide awake in the middle of the night.
It's
I'm
a really lovely
oversimplifying,
way of describing it. You know, it's very helpful. I know that there are many reasons that somebody might not be able to sleep, so we're not saying this is the everything.
Correct.
But I don't know if you feel the same way, Marcelle, but it is the major factor. Would you agree?
It is. I mean, I originally only worked with people who were stressed and anxious and depressed, and I would find, and obviously, you know, and I know that probably the number one predictor of poor mental health, of stress, of anxiety, of depression is not sleeping. It's the first thing you notice is your sleep disappearing. But I then found that there was a second group of people coming to see me for sleep-related issues that didn't have stress and anxiety. And that really was what I would call clinical insomnia. And that's where they've just got into a habit. The way I, again, kind of, I like my analogies. I'm always off on analogies, but it's a little bit like, you know, babies, when we're born, we know how to sleep, right? We're born with the ability to sleep, but we have to be trained in when to sleep and how long to sleep for. And we train babies to sleep because they just sleep, right? They're like animals. If you think about an animal, I think humans are the only animal that on purpose delay sleep, right? If you think about all other animals, when they're sleepy, they sleep. And babies are little animals, right? They haven't been trained yet to be a human. So they sleep when they want to sleep. And of course, we as trained humans don't want them to sleep in the middle of the day and be awake at night. So we train them. And at some point, some people unlearn how to sleep well. And that's generally triggered by something that tips them over into insomnia. And that could be a trauma, that could be a life event, or just a full stress bucket, right? But then we perpetuate that insomnia by kind of thinking, oh, I'm so tired, I'm going to go to bed early, or I'll have a lie-in tomorrow, or we start to introduce behaviours that we think will help because we haven't slept well. And then over time, those behaviours make the problem worse, because what they do is they mess with our circadian rhythm, they mess with our sleep drive, they mess with a whole pile of things that are actually the things we need to sleep well. So there's two, for me, distinct groups, but I totally agree with you that for most of us, there is definitely stress. We live in a world, right? You can't get away from it. You can't get away from stress, which is why I think this podcast is so awesome, because we all get stressed, and even people who know how to manage stress well still get stressed, right? Because we're human. So exactly, it's life, and we're not designed as human beings to live in the stress-filled world that we now find ourselves in. So yes, I think stress is a major factor in poor sleep. But it's, for some people it's not. And I generally always say that because there are some people who go, but I don't have anxiety, and and in my mind I'm going, you kind of do, but you don't know that you do, because we don't always recognize it. I had
that with somebody recently where they were insisting it wasn't to do with stress, and I've got quite a thorough consultation about sleep where I look at everything.
Yes.
And it so was, but she didn't want to see that.
Exactly.
I had a really interesting case. I just would like to share it with you, if that's okay. Where this was many years ago, where a client couldn't sleep, and in my consultation, I found out that she had a young daughter who had been diagnosed with diabetes, and she was very up and down with her blood sugars. And the mother was so worried she'd go into a hypo and that she wouldn't be alert to the risk, that she was just half
alert
awake.
To the threat.
Yeah.
Alert to the threat. Alert to the threat is cortisol. Yeah, which is awake.
What was interesting is, you and I do hypnotherapy. What was interesting is I did some hypnotherapy that allowed her to relax, but there's a part of her mind that would know the difference between a real need through her daughter,
yes,
just noise,
yes,
and she was able to sleep. So there can be very subtle ways that our sleep is interrupted, and very subtle ways that our sleep is aided as well.
Absolutely right. I totally agree, because it's our primitive brain, that fight flight part of our brain, that steps in when it thinks there's a threat. But we do have this intellectual brain that allows us to override it. So again, my analogy is always, I love my analogies, you know, you've known me for a long time, I love my analogies, but it's a little bit like, you know, if you are spiders, right? I'm going to pick spiders because it's one of the most common phobias, and a phobia being an irrational fear, but when you're feeling it, it doesn't feel irrational, right? And I used to be one of those people who was terrified of spiders, and I would watch them. You know, there would be one in the house, and I literally fixated, right? Couldn't take my eyes off the threat. And I have no idea what I was thinking, because I wasn't thinking, right? Because I was overtaken by fear. But I would be focused on this threat, thinking, as long as I watch it, it's not going to get me, which is nonsensical, right? Completely nonsensical. Because I don't know what I thought it was going to do to me, because it was only this small. But it's the fear of something happening that keeps you focused, keeps you alert, keeps you ready. But if you can just bring that fear down a little bit, so that your intellectual brain can kind of go, it's just a spider. It's not going to hurt you. You might not like it, but it's not going to hurt you. Then you can start to override. Or it's, you know, a little bit like if you're walking in the country and you see a snake slither across your path, a little grass snake, you get that shocked, right? You get that instant stress response. But you can kick in and kind of go, it's just a grass snake, it's fine, and then go off on your way. Or you can allow it to completely go, oh, it's a snake, and then I'm in the primitive brain, and then I can't think. So I totally agree with you. It's about finding that way to switch over into the bit of your brain that knows it's okay. It's okay to sleep. It's nothing bad's going to happen. It's okay to.
There's something about language as well that I really like. It's so when we say things like it's not going to hurt you, nothing bad's going to happen, we're kind of hearing bad's going to happen, hurt you. So I like using language carefully, such as saying you're perfectly safe, everything's fine, which is doing the same thing but without the suggestion of the problem.
Love it. I totally agree. Totally agree. Because obviously, so my doctorate is in how the brain processes language. That's my thing. And I totally agree with you. It's
so subtle, isn't it? But it really does make a difference. But massive. We go into that fight or flight, and anybody who's not had a phobia, they just think that it's craziness. It's not crazy. No. It's a real fear, just illogical, but it's still real.
Exactly right.
So, exactly Marcelle, right. What are your best tips? Because what we're saying here is it feels out of control and it just kind of happens. So how can people enjoy better sleep even though they're having stress?
So for people who are stressed, it generally, as you exactly said, it feels like it's out of our control. So for me, it's really important to feel like you are more in control, and that reduces the stress. So the very first thing I recommend is something like journaling. And I call it a worry journal. Again, bad choice of language, but it's kind of where you, a couple of hours before bed, just jot down all of your worries. Okay, regardless of whether your rational brain kicks in and goes, it's so stupid, I'm not going to write this down, this is such a stupid worry, it's not even, if it's a worry and it's real, so write it down. And get all of those worry thoughts out of your head where the trouble is, and onto paper. And once they're on paper, your rational brain gets a different perspective. Because for me, our brains are consumed with worry thoughts. Worry thoughts live outside of our conscious awareness, right? They're just there roaming around in our heads. And because they live in the subconscious part of our brain, which is where our primitive brain is, we tend to have the same thoughts. They're habitual, just like we talk about habits as being actions, but actually habitual thoughts are also habits. And so what we have are these habitual thoughts just going around on a loop. And in our minds, we think we've got 1,000 things to do or 1,000 things to worry about. And actually, when you put them down on paper, there's far less of them. That's because your brain has been playing them on a loop. So you think there are thousands, but actually it's just the same one thing that's been going round on a loop.
Yeah.
So once you get them down on paper, you can see what you're dealing with, and you get now a chance to problem solve them. So then I always say to my clients, okay, now look at this list and color code them, put them into 3 different groups. You've kind of got the red group, if you like. This is the group of things that you haven't yet found a solution to, or you can't do anything about yet. So that gets parked, and that will go onto your worry list for tomorrow, because there's nothing you can do about it right now. Then the second list is kind of the amber list, if you like, which is there is something I can do about it, but not right now, and certainly not before I go to bed. And it's not so important that it has to be done today, so I'm going to put it on tomorrow's list. And then the last one is kind of the green list, which is actually there's something I can do about this now, and I'm going to do it now, and then go do it. And that way you are taking control. Yeah. You're taking control of the worry, because we know, don't we, that worry tends to take control of us and takes us places that we don't want to go. So we do one of 2 things. We either engage with the worry, or we try to suppress the worry. Yeah. But what we're not doing is taking control of it. Yeah. So for me, for people that really worry a lot, that's a really good strategy, because that will help them sleep. So when the brain pops up at night with a ding, 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 you can kind of go, I've done it. I've dealt with everything. Yeah. It's fine. Okay. Or, you know, if a new thought pops up, then you could have a little pen and paper by the side of your bed, and you can just jot it down, but agree with yourself that you'll deal with it tomorrow in your time that you are allocating to dealing with it. It's not something that you have to deal with right now.
I love that, because it frees up the mind.
Yes.
It also gives them a sense of actually I can do something, and I can forget about this now because it's on my list, and I will think about what I can do about it.
Yes.
When the right idea comes to mind. But there's some things though people worry about what they can't do anything about.
I know. And
that's so that the what's the thing? The Serenity Prayer is really great for that, isn't it?
Okay, so I don't know. It's not something that I use.
Oh, this is brilliant then. So the Serenity Prayer is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Nice.
So there are some things we just have to accept they are what they are.
Yeah.
So I was in a bad habit of thinking about somebody who had an important position in America. I was worrying about the state of the world, and it was really affecting me. You know, I was thinking, why am I spending so much brain time on this person? But there's nothing I can do about it, and it's really affecting my life. I need to let it go. Or is it something that I can do something about? Yes. Actually, I can be the opposite of that person. I can just show that there's a different way of being in the world. Yes. And that gave me a sense of, not that I'm running the States, by the way, I'm not thinking
yet, just let's add the yet. Yep.
But it's like, well, he's doing that way, and that's him. And so I just do things my way, and that's me. And I can just affect my world around me. And so that's that in action. It's used a lot in the 12-step programs, yes. But actually it's a really terrific technique when we're worried about things. Can I do anything about that? No, then don't worry. Can I do something about that? Yes, then don't worry, do something about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fits in love beautifully with what you're saying, but just reminds people, sometimes, we just have to accept it is what it is.
Yeah, and some people struggle with that. Some people really struggle with acceptance. So for me, that's where the baby step strategy comes in, which is, okay, so what can you do that you have control over to change this?
Yeah.
And I just, like you were saying, language, tweak the wording really slightly, which is, okay, well, can you do anything about that directly? Or is there anything that you have control over that you can do?
Beautiful.
And it helps people remember that, because it goes back to that fight flight, which is when there's a big saber-toothed tiger chasing me, I'm not in control of it.
Yeah.
So it's about, how do you put yourself in control of things? Because when I imagine it's the same for you, but it's certainly for me, when clients come to see me in my consultation, one of the most common things I hear is, I just want to get back some control of my life.
Yeah.
So that worry journal for me is that. But you're absolutely right. Most of the time we worry about things that, well, worry isn't rational in most cases. Anxiety isn't. We don't tend to worry about the big things, right? We worry about the stuff not going into the dishwasher, right? That's the stuff that make
big things.
The big things. But it's really about, you know, as you say, you know, what do I have control over? And just accept the things that I can't, and worry about me. Just worry about me. Let me do what I can do. And if there's nothing I can do about it, just let it go. Okay. In the words of that song, and I won't sing, but you know, just
you've got it. It's going to stick with me all day now. It just jumps into
like a little earworm. I'm sorry. I like to share the earworms.
One small, tiny extra tip, just a quick one.
So in terms of sleep, one of the most important things you can do is go to bed and wake up at a regular time every single day. Our circadian rhythm is that thing that just goes up and down over a sleep-wake cycle, goes up and down, regardless of whether we sleep or not. It just goes up and down and does its thing. And if you can train it to expect sleep at a certain time of day and expect wakefulness at a certain time of day, it will work like a charm. Otherwise, if what you do is you go to bed an hour or two later on a Saturday, or you lie in by an hour on a Sunday morning, again with my analogy head on, you're essentially causing jet lag to your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you fly 2 hours away, somewhere that's 2 or 3 hours away, you know it, right? Even an hour. For work, I used to regularly fly to Holland. And just that 1 hour time difference to my body would be enough to disrupt my sleep for that night and probably the next night. So if you are constantly changing your bedtime or your wake time by an hour either way or more, you are causing your body jet lag, and you are going to struggle with your sleep.
Yeah.
So routine is really, really important. And I think certainly in the COVID world, routine is one of the things that's gone out the window in so many different ways, which is why I think we've seen a huge increase. So before the pandemic started, it was about 1 in 4 people, about 27% of people struggled with poor sleep. And now it's 67%. It's 2 in 3 people. And I think a lot of that is because of the lack of routine. We don't have work to go to in the same way. The children haven't got school to go to in the same way. Meal times have moved. Everything is moved. We were talking about it before the cameras rolled, right? Our days are just rolling in, and we just don't have a structure anymore. So certainly I don't, and a lot of people I speak to, just that, you know, we don't know what day it is most of the time. And I think that lack of routine has caused a big issue, because now people are mucking with their sleep routines because they don't have to get up for work in the morning, so they're sleeping in a bit, we need routine. We have our sleep. I think number one tip.
Really good for sleep and stress. So although I don't want to make this about COVID, we are in lockdown at the moment, and this is a time of extreme uncertainty. So when you honor routines anyway, that way you've got some certainty. So it eases stress and it helps with sleep.
Absolutely.
So, I don't want to pretend this is the answer to every sleep problem, because it's a lot more complicated than that, isn't it, Marcelle? But hopefully that's given you some strategies to help you with sleep, and you've got 2 experts here to help you. If your problem doesn't fit into these solutions, I'm sure that one of us will be able to help you enjoy a much better, deep and restorative sleep at night. Now, I usually ask my clients, my interviewees. My guests, that's a better way of saying it, isn't it? If there's a book that they've read that they found uplifting or helpful that others might find uplifting or helpful too. Do you have one in mind?
I do, and I don't have a hard copy because although I've got lots of books on my shelf behind me, I'm really a Kindle person now because I was spending so much money on books that I use Kindle now, so I don't have a copy, but it's a little book by Richard Carlson called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. I imagine a lot of other people have recommended it, but it's Don't Sweat the Small Stuff because it's all small stuff. And it's a little bit like the dishwasher example at the beginning, which is, it's full of really good little tips on how to not let the little things control your life.
Brilliant.
So it's one of my favorite books, and it's not a big book.
It's quite an old book, isn't it? But it's just so good, and
it is
so beautifully written and so accessible.
Yes.
And tiny can go in your handbag.
Exactly. If you haven't got a Kindle, yes, it can go in your handbag. Always room for, to be honest, my handbag's quite large, so I've got a lot of room for a lot of things in my handbag, but yes, certainly room for that.
Absolutely. It's been really nice chatting to you, Marcelle. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
People found it helpful too. If you have, please like and share and give some comments below. You might have your own sleep tip that you'd like to share with us. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do that too. You take care now.